Thank you very much, and welcome to the November 18th Public Planning Committee meeting. Krista, have we complied with FOIA?
Yes, sir, we have.
Thank you. And Krista, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly, sir. Mr. Ames?
Here.
Mrs. Becker?
Here.
Mr. Brown?
Here.
Mr. Stanford?
I'm here.
All present, sir.
Actually, Krista, Mr. Stanford is here, and Mr. Lennox is probably standing on the sidelines if needed.
Correct. I have him in conference room 1. He's in a meeting right now.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure.
Tell him
Are there
not to
any
worry.
comments? Pardon, Glenn?
Tell Tom not to worry.
Yeah. Are there any recommended changes to the agenda? And if not, is there a motion to approve?
Don't move.
Is there a second? All
Second.
those in favor, just signify by raising your right hand. Thank you very much. And approval of minutes. Are there any corrections, deletions, omissions in the minutes?
Move
Hearing
adoption
none, is there
written.
a motion to approve?
Yes.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
And all those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Thank you very much. I'm not sure if we have anybody signed up to speak today. Krista, do we?
Yes, sir, we do. We have Mr. Frank Babel is signed up today to speak.
Before we catch him, I'd like to just recognize a comment that Lorraine Buchanan wrote in. I just wanted to reassure her that her comments would be passed on to staff for their consideration. Thank you. Go ahead with Frank.
Mr. Babel, go ahead. Frank?
I'm just waiting for him to unmute.
Okay. Frank, can you hear us? Can you please proceed? Chairman, Mr. Ames, do you want me to come back to him after we've figured out his audio?
I think that would be fine because we can go on to short-term rental ordinance at this time.
Chris
And
has unmuted himself.
Oh, Mr. Babel, Frank, are you unmuted? Can you hear us?
I'm unmuted.
Oh, go.
I believe-
You're good. Go ahead. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here. I appreciate you listening to me. It was a privilege to be a part of this team. It was an experienced team, a multidisciplined team, multi-jurisdictional, highly motivated, very experienced. They got together, found a need, been working for 2 years and found a solution. So our hope today is, and it's great having Hilton Head's active participation in this effort because it truly was a regional effort. So we really hope you folks approve this and move it forward to town council. But the real purpose of me being on this call is to talk about a pathway that the task force and town staff have discussed that's not being reviewed today. It's going to plant a seed in your minds for the future for you to think about because you're a planning organization in many ways. And as you know, in Amsterdam and many European cities, most of the folks who go to work commute by bike. And during the last decade, the bikes have become pedal assisted. So as we look ahead and when our bridge is built and the pathways are in, we would expect a significant increase in commuter biking from the mainland here and for tourists going to the mainland. Many of these people who will be commuting will be workers in the South End. And their path right now, when the bridge is complete and the route is in, will be along the William Hilton Parkway or Spanish Wells, which has a significant number of curb cuts. So it becomes sort of a practicality for that to really be an effective way to commute. So the idea is to build a pathway down the Cross Island Expressway corridor. It'll run over the bridge and down the south side of Palmetto Bay Road into Sea Pine Circle. Now, this is something you don't have to obviously react to right now. It's something, it's planting a seed in your mind to think about. But in a couple of years or so, as the bridge starts being built, the pathway routes get settled and all that sort of thing, we really want to start thinking about this, okay? And that's my comment that I was asked to present to you by town staff and the task force. Thank you very much, and we appreciate your support of this project.
Thank you, Frank.
Real pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate that. All right, the next item in business is a monthly update on the short-term rental ordinance initiative. We have staff members Chris Yates, Terry Lewis, Ann Siren, and Sean Colin available. Who is going to lead off?
Sir, that'll be me, Ann Siren. If you give me just
All
a
right.
second, I need to share my screen.
Okay.
And Krista, can you give me some direction on that? I'm not finding the share screen.
Absolutely. At the bottom of the screen is a green box that says share.
That is the way to share it. Thank you. I don't know why I
You're
didn't see it.
welcome.
It's right in front of me. All right. I'm hoping that you all can see the screen now.
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patience. Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Ann Siren, Interim Comprehensive Planning Manager. I'll be presenting an update on staff's work on the short-term rental initiative. Please stop me at any point to ask questions. At this point in the process, we're listening to input from all stakeholders so we can sincerely respond to that input. Ultimately, we want a solution that makes sense for Hilton Head Island. I'll review the purpose of the initiative, the timeline, what we've done so far, and our next steps. The purpose of the short-term rental initiative is to address an imbalance between residential and resort districts. The town is seeking input from all stakeholders to develop a balanced program to manage short-term rentals in a fair and predictable way. We're at the beginning of this project and we're in listening mode right now. We want to hear from and understand all perspectives before we move forward. This project timeline, which I believe you were sent a little bit ago, gives an overview of the project and the process. The project began in earnest, as you'll remember, with your workshop on September 28th. Right now, we're in the middle of the first phase, which includes the public and stakeholder outreach and data development and research. For public and stakeholder outreach, we developed a list of individuals and groups with insights into and a stake in the short-term rental process. I'll review the groups we've met with and what we've heard so far. We also developed a communication plan to ensure engagement with stakeholders and the public during this process. We'd like your feedback on that draft communication plan, which we'll send to you and after this meeting. This first stage also includes data development and research. Staff has reached out to companies that analyze these short-term rental listings for some preliminary data so we can better understand short-term rentals on the island. And I'll review a few points from that data. In terms of a time frame, we're expecting to wrap up this first phase of the program at the end of January. And we'll take everything we've heard from stakeholders and the community and synthesize it before we move on to phase two, which includes considering program alternatives. As I mentioned, we're gathering feedback from a wide variety of stakeholders. So far, we've hosted meetings with community managers, realtors, the Chamber of Commerce, rental property management companies, neighborhood representatives, the Planning Commission, and the Home Builders Association. We did receive input from the Sheriff's Office. They declined to attend a meeting, but they gave us some general information on their service calls to resort areas. And I'll summarize the themes of what we've heard from these stakeholders after I review the stakeholders that we will meet with shortly. So these are the ones that we have to date. Our future stakeholder meetings include short-term rental owners, a group of vacation rental industry experts, the Native Island Business and Community Affairs Association and Gullah community leaders, neighborhood residents from resort areas, the public service district managers, and Sea Pines Resort Management. In terms of what we've heard so far, there's a wide range of opinions. This list doesn't include the entire range of feedback we've received, but it can give you some common themes of what we've heard. And we've heard kind of both sides of this issue. We've heard definitely about the benefits of short-term rentals for the island's economy. And it's clear that there is a strong desire for vacationers for short-term rentals, especially single-family homes. We've also heard some concerns about short-term rentals. Some were related to their impacts on their neighbors with issues like noise, a lack of parking spaces, increased traffic in neighborhoods, trash left out or littering, and too many occupants given the size of the unit. Short-term rentals, we've heard that they have a negative impact on the character of residential neighborhoods. There's new neighbors every week. There are also general concerns about the lack of housing on the island that's created when short-term rentals are converted, or excuse me, when single-family homes are converted to these short-term rental properties. Neighbors need to know how to report problems, and someone representing the property needs to be on call to resolve the problems. That's a consensus from what we've heard. We've also heard that regulations need to be clear to owners and property managers so they know what to expect. And there is consensus that communication and messaging are going to be keys to the program's success, which we agree with. The stakeholder meetings are one element of the draft communication strategy that we've put together. As I said, we're in listening mode. We're trying to get as much input as possible and keep the public informed of the process and their opportunities for participation in the process. We're currently scheduling virtual and in-person open house meetings for the general public, which are targeted for December. Staff also drafted a survey for an additional opportunity for public input. We'd like the committee's feedback on that survey, so we'll send that to you shortly and ask for you to get back to us with your comments. After we incorporate your comments and get reviewed by management, we'll publish the survey in open town hall, and that'll be open for a month. We'll notify the public of the survey, of updates to the initiative, of future meetings through news releases, the town's e-subscription service, and in social media posts. We also have a short-term rental initiative section on the town website. That includes the purpose statement that we reviewed earlier, the timeline, and the previous presentation. We'll add this presentation to that. We plan to update the information for the initiative and include a link to the survey and updates. And we'll send a list of those updates to you for your review and input before we make those changes to the town website. We'll also seek opportunities for interviews with local media outlets to further notify and update the public throughout this initiative. As part of the data development and research portion of the first phase of this initiative, staff is collecting and reviewing preliminary data from several reputable short-term rental monitoring services. So there are companies that scrape data from the internet and can provide you with an overview of short-term rentals in your community. One takeaway from the preliminary data is the extent of the growth of short-term rentals in the past 2 years. You can see from 4,000 listings in November 2019 to 10,500 this month. Just a note that each timeshare is counted as a single listing, so that's not over accounting timeshare properties. Again, these numbers are preliminary but fairly consistent between the services. Staff is coordinating with the business license division to enter into a contract with a one of these professional short-term rental monitoring services to provide more data for this initiative and for business license services. So we'll work together with that data.
And I'd like to interrupt for just a second. Going from 4,000 to 10,500 seems exaggerated. Do you have any indication of what kind of units comprise that increase?
I can't tell you about the increase. What I can tell you is that the current number consists of approximately 55% single-family homes and about 40% condos, based on the preliminary data. Now, We do have to contract with one of the providers to have these numbers verified, but I was told that there shouldn't be too much variation in what they found.
My reaction, and it's only a reaction, is 4,000 is too low and 10,500 is too high. How do we get an accurate number? I've been told the number is somewhere around 8,000, and I'm not sure what the 2,500 constitutes, is constituted by what kind of unit. So I'd like more information on that, please.
Yes, sir.
As long as we.
David, while you're asking questions,
Whoops.
while you're asking a question, let me pose a comment to you on the timeline. I recognize that you're trying to do a very thorough process here, and I greatly respect the public impact or input that you're seeking and receiving. But what I see is that this is not going to be finalized until the absolute peak high season next summer, July. And if there's any way we can accelerate that timeline to get some of this regulation in place before then, it would serve us well.
Thank you. Tammy, you had a question?
A couple of things, and just so I don't skip over what Glenn just said, I think that's critical. I also believe we need to get it right. So, moving too fast often doesn't accomplish that particular goal. But people are now currently already booked with rentals for this coming season. And so that urgency that Glenn spoke of, I think is even more, it couldn't be more overstated by the fact that how this might impact those rentals for this coming season needs to be known and clearly messaged promptly. I don't know how else to say it, but hopefully that made sense to everyone. And then in terms of the numbers that you were referencing, David, what I was writing down, going through Ann's excellent presentation here, a question was of how many of the 4,000, which I would imagine is where you'd find the numbers, since we haven't had any increase in timeshares that I'm thinking quickly of in the last couple of years, how many of that 4,000 or the 10,500 are timeshare units? And that would be one question to tease out of there for me. And then another one would be just a number of how many new builds, generally, new construction builds, have we had in between those years of 19 to 21. I think that will start to give some insight in terms of that increase in number. Also, I guess another place, and I'm not sure this is possible, I think someone has asked this in the past and it wasn't as easy as it might have sounded, but to distinguish between how many 4% versus 6% residences we have, and whether or not there's been a substantial increase in that number, because that too, I would imagine at least could, seemingly give us some insight into how many people have changed their primary residencies and kept their homes and turned them into rentals. So those are a couple of thoughts in terms of trying to tease apart the 4,000 versus 10,500. And I'm not sure if all of those are possible, but those were my notes to ask in terms of that question.
Thank you, Tam. Go ahead, Ann.
Yes, thank you. We'll seek every opportunity to expedite this process and report back to you if we can move that timeline up, if that's the desire of the committee. And in terms of the data, we agree our priority is to get reliable data to move forward with this process. We're expediting our process to get a contract with a provider so we can, one, verify the preliminary data that they gave us, which is a part of a contract that we would have to have. and then dig into those numbers and get those answers for you that you wanted to fine tune our understanding of the situation.
Right, and I think
And
that's it. It's just an understanding of the situation. I'm not sure really it makes much of a difference, quite frankly, but it would be interesting to know those statistics anyway.
Go ahead, Ann.
Okay. And just wrapping up, in terms of next steps, we'll continue listening to stakeholders to understand their concerns and sincerely respond to those concerns. We'll complete the initial stakeholder meetings in December or possibly January. We will host open house meetings for the public. The draft communication plan, the draft survey, and the webpage updates will be sent to the committee for your review. Once we have your feedback and approval approval from management on the survey, we'll publish and advertise that. And we'll continue to pursue, like I said, that contract with the data monitoring company. And by the time we provide another update to you, we will have an update on that data and hopefully answers for your questions and some opportunities to speed up the process if that's the desire of the committee. Are there any other questions that I can answer?
Well, let's.
I do when you're ready, David.
Okay, well, you're up, Glenn. Go ahead.
Thank you. Several weeks ago, with a couple that lives down in the Folly Field area, and the lady was literally in tears because she said the noise from the nearby party houses is ruining her dream home in retirement. It really stuck with me. I hear that you have an orderly process going. I know that beginning in January, we're going to have the ability, and we will, in fact, be licensing individual rental properties. I'm wondering if we can begin some form of aggressive use of the noise ordinance here on Hilton Head Island well before the expiration of the timeline, so that we can get some relief to the people who are suffering from the abuses. I'm convinced that not all of the short-term rentals are abusing the privilege, but clearly there are some, and we need to find a way to absolutely regulate those, and I hope we can do that sooner rather than later. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Tammy, your comments, thoughts? You want to
Well,
add?
picking up again on what Glenn mentioned, it does. The experience he had with the homeowner in Folly Field, that's one. There are many, and that reaction of just despair is also replicated across the island in conversations that I've personally had with people who have contacted me about the loss of the quality of life for them and how things have changed in their neighborhood. So this is real and important and needs to be a priority and quickly moved into place. Which brings me to the one thing that Glenn mentioned, the strict enforcement of the noise ordinance. The problem, as it's been described to me, is that our noise ordinance doesn't really come into play in a way that would really most often help these situations that people are finding themselves in. So does it make sense that we revisit, and I don't know who does that, what committee or how it gets generated or started, but it's a question for us here now. Is there something with regard to the noise ordinance itself that we need to address to make it more comprehensive so that it can provide some relief in the daytime hours when most of, not all, but most of the dislocation for these folks is happening? So that's one question. Second would be a lot of the concerns about making sure we get this right. There was a consultant that was hired who was supposed to be, part of the plan in terms of writing an ordinance that would help us get it right so that we didn't stumble and fall and have to backtrack and redo. Is that consultant still engaged?
Yes, ma'am, they are still engaged. Currently, the staff is going to schedule the remaining stakeholder meetings, the open houses, and we're sharing all that information with that consultant as we move through the process.
Thank you. I like that idea. I like having our staff, having you guys who are, very familiar with our town and neighborhood and our neighbors, looking at this, talking with them. I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Alex, do you have thoughts, comments that you'd like to add?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I concur with comments thus far from the rest of the committee. At our last session on this topic, and I know I asked the question about a problem statement to staff and the consultant. I'm assuming that the consultant is still working on that. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And I just want to make sure that I guess I'm clear on that request. I think the metrics are so important. Once we have gone through the community engagement process, which I thank you very much for leading that off. Once we've had further discussion, once we've developed policy, our baseline where we are today versus where we are 3-5 years from now is going to be so important to us understanding if we've made a difference, right? So I think having that problem statement is definitely going to help us measure it, okay? And to that degree, the data that we are pulling down from this, I guess, monitoring expert is the way that you've described it. Do we have any idea of a sampling of disciplines that they are using to develop that data?
Are you referring to the different rental companies that they're getting their data from?
Yeah, the increase from 4,000 units back in 2019 to, I think it was 10,500 current.
What we'd like to do is once we contract with one of these companies is really get into that data and explain that difference to you. One, verify the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They seem confident in those numbers to some degree of certainty, but really get into those numbers and explain if that is in fact the change, and then we can look into geographic areas, maybe look at those trends and understand them better.
Yeah, I just think it'd be worthwhile as you get further along with whichever company you decide to go with, that those disciplines that they're using to develop the data be shared with not just us as a committee, but the public at whole, okay? Because, I don't know the variables, okay? And I don't, by any means, want to be an expert as they are, but just understanding it, how they derive to those numbers, I think is important to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other than that, I'm good, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. But I'd like to continue your thought on a problem statement, because you have been hitting on that now for a month or two. Give me a little bit of a better idea what would go into that problem statement. What are you getting at?
Off the top of my head, Councilman Ames, I'll just use some examples. These are not anything concrete by any means, okay? Let's just say that we find out that we've got that 8,000 unit number that you referred to earlier, right? We verified that that's the number, okay? Well, is that too many or too less would be the problem statement to me, okay? Or is that our number that we want to stay around, a 10 or 15% fluctuation, either way, all right? That would be an example. We've heard time and time again about the quality of life that is disrupted in neighborhoods because of the transformation of long-term rentals or single family to short-term rentals, right? Okay, so to me, that would be another piece of the problem statement, right? How we protect neighborhoods, that sort of thing. So that's kind of the direction I'm going. And I think we're gathering a lot of information through the community engagement, but I don't think that we can implement policy unless we really know what we're trying to accomplish. It just gets back to the metric at the end of the day.
So it's identifying the elements that we hope to deal with or resolve with a nuanced solution.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Okay. And a question, Glenn brought up the issue of accelerating the process, but then it was also mentioned that some people have already booked time in a condo that or a villa, whatever, that might be affected by an ordinance that were adopted. The question, and you don't have to try to answer it, I'd be interested in the answer though, at some point, is there a legal means to give notice to rental owners that an ordinance may be established and may impact their ability to rent? Is that something that we need to consider doing or not? And then secondly, I'm interested in knowing who has participated in this process. So would you kindly send us a list of the people who have participated in the focus groups? I may want to follow up with some of those people and just have my own conversations, and other members of the Public Planning Committee might want to do the same.
Of course, I'll be happy to send that to you. And to address your first question, that's something we'll certainly look into and get back to you.
Okay. And I'm looking forward to receiving the draft survey, and we'll get that back to you right away as soon as we receive it.
David, I have one more comment, if I might.
You may.
Thank you. I recently heard of another class, to me at least, another class of short-term rental, and that is something called a party house. I had a call from a citizen, actually 2 or 3 citizens, who were impacted by a house. This was down at the end of Beach City Road, where a party began this past Saturday at 10 o'clock and continued on till well after 1 o'clock in the morning, getting louder and louder. So our definition needs to include very short-term rental, hours rental, plus however else we define the length of the term. That's my comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll close with just one comment. In the conversations that I've had with rental managers and resort operators, they recognize the threat to our quality brand if we don't have standards that reinforce that quality. So I think our conversations going forward will bear fruit if we find those areas where we are in agreement and develop those. And I've had some good conversations with people who see the threat and want to do something about it. And it's just a matter of our finding alignment between the disparate points of view at the extremes. So Ann, thank you very much. I appreciate the time the staff has put into this. And we look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Now, the next item of business is a review and discussion of a resolution to authorize the submission of the town pathway projects into the Beaufort County Connects Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan 2021. And I believe Missy Lewick is going to be our staff presenter. Is that correct, Missy?
That's correct.
Good. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Missy Lewick, Senior Planner for the Record, and I have the opportunity to introduce this topic to you, as well as introduce Juliana Smith from the county, who will give you a brief presentation. I believe, and as anyone on Hilton Head I think does as well, that pathways and sidewalks are essential elements in community design, and that pathways have the ability to improve health and create more vibrant neighborhoods. Investing in trails is an investment in community development, a healthy and active outdoor culture, which in turn inspires a high quality of life for both locals and tourists. Pathways provide more than just increased mobility. They become part of the thread of a healthy community, a linear park, a safe place to bike or walk, a place to teach your child how to ride a bike or just connect with nature. And pathways are transformative. They connect us to parks and places, to the outdoors, to our neighbors, and to destinations within the community. And this plan in front of us is a collaborative, multi-jurisdictional effort to prioritize safe places to walk and bike throughout the county. And the title, Beaufort County Connects, is very fitting as the plan provides a big picture strategy to do just that, to develop an interconnected network of pathways connecting Beaufort County communities and beyond. And I want to thank Beaufort County for initiating the effort to convene the task force to develop the plan. It was a great pleasure to work on the collaborative project with leaders from the entire county. The town is being asked to support a resolution to authorize the inclusion of 16 projects, pathway projects into the plan. And the town of Hilton Head identified projects are either from the CIP or from other previously adopted plans. Beaufort County is requesting support of the plan from neighboring jurisdictions as well. And the plan has already been supported by the town of Bluffton, by the town of Port Royal, Beaufort County, and they have plans to go to Hardeeville and Jasper County soon. So the cover memo did include, so you don't have to dive through the document to find those 16 projects that the town is submitting. They're in the cover memo that was included in the packet. And the resolution that's before you is to authorize those 16 projects into this plan. At this time, I'm going to introduce Juliana Smith. She's the long-range planner for Beaufort County. She's going to give you a brief presentation on Beaufort County Connects. Juliana?
Thanks, Missy.
Thank you, Missy. And I'm going to share my screen.
Welcome, Juliana.
Thank you. All right, are you all able to see my presentation?
We are.
Yes.
Fantastic. So, well, for the record, I am Juliana Smith. I am the long-range planner for Beaufort County, and I had the unique pleasure of working on this project in two different roles. I was one of the advocate roles on the task force for the Coastal Conservation League when I was there, and then now get to bring this plan over the finish line by going to each of our municipalities and our counties to ask for support and adoption. So I appreciate y'all's time today. And as Missy said, it is a multi-jurisdictional effort. It has been adopted in Port Royal and in Bluffton. Beaufort County has adopted it as well as a part of its comprehensive plan. You all are taking it up today to move it through the process on Hilton Head, and the city of Beaufort will be taking it up on the last day of the month. So we're still working with Hardeeville and Jasper County because we'd like to have them in on this too, since there is a regional component that stretches out that way, but it's been moving along really well. And I'm going to get into some of the details of the plan and how it was done and what all's included and why. I think Missy did a really excellent job summarizing a lot of the benefits, the positives of planning for your bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, having safe places for people to move around without the use of a car. And you all on Hilton Head know this probably better than most of us in Beaufort County, how important bicycle pathways and pedestrian pathways are, because there's so many there already. And I've actually been using you all as an example of the benefits of having bicycle and pedestrian pathways in my presentations to other municipalities municipalities. They do improve the health of our individual residents and tourists in the county, mentally and physically, but they also strengthen the health of our communities where people can get out and interact with one another, see one another, meet their neighbors, make friendships. They improve our environmental health by reducing the amount of cars on the road and thereby the amount of pollution and emissions. They improve our economic health. They're able to bring in tourism, bring in people, connect people to jobs, connect jobs to the people. And they're also a great equalizer so that those who don't have vehicles or cannot rely on vehicles to get to where they need to go or get to the services they need will have an alternative route to do that. I myself use bicycle and pedestrian pathways to get to and from work. So it's a really helpful thing to have to connect everyone to the services and jobs and economic hubs. Now, the task force started out late 2019 and worked all the way through 2020 to get this plan to life. And really, there were three primary objectives driving everything that went forward. They were making connections throughout the county so that we have a better integrated network. They were making walking and biking more routine in our community so that it's not just a recreational thing that people do, but that it's something that people do day to day to get from point A to point B, and to improve the equity throughout the county by being able to connect people who aren't relying on vehicles or aren't able to rely on vehicles to the places they need to go, regardless of economic status, race, gender, ages, and abilities. And the way this was developed, the plan was developed, is you had your multi-jurisdictional task force that included bicycle, pedestrian advocacy groups and environmental advocacy groups, as well as some citizen advocates to help start to identify what we already have and what gaps we need to fill within our own bicycle pedestrian network. And then we took all of those ideas to the public through a survey. The survey had almost 2,000 respondents, which is, I cannot stress how impressive that is. That's a lot of people responding to that survey in my experience of surveys. And what we found is that over 60% of them said that they would like walking and biking to be something they do more frequently in their day-to-day lives, but they're not sure about where it is. There are needs that need to be filled. They were also able, the public was, to identify the gaps that they see in their communities. So there was a mapping exercise. They could look at existing infrastructure and say where they think we need future bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. So it was a really great way to get input from all of them, especially during a time of COVID. And through these processes, we developed 3 guiding principles, and you'll see they seem pretty similar to the previous slide because they go hand in hand with the objectives. But there are 3 guiding principles that are interwoven throughout the document and ultimately create the network, the planned network that I'll show you in just a moment. And those are, of course, making connections. And then they are with regard to creating a more routine practice of using bicycles and walking and pedestrian infrastructure, targeting the interested but concerned group. This was something that came out of our survey exercise. All of the respondents to the survey were able to self-identify how they feel about walking and biking. So they might be someone who's not interested at all. They might be a fearless person who's out there on the Sea Island Parkway biking next to vehicles, or on 170 biking next to vehicles, or they might be interested, but they're concerned. Maybe they're not completely comfortable. They don't feel safe enough on the facilities that they have access to. Maybe they're not sure where the facilities are or how to use them. And studies have shown that targeting this group of bicyclers and pedestrians is the best way to increase the number of people using bicycle and pedestrian facilities and infrastructure. And in our study results, about half of the respondents self-identified as interested but concerned. And half of them said that if they knew more about our infrastructure, they would be out and about and using it. And so we really want to target them with educational campaigns as we create more bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and to use our current infrastructure. And then last but not least is the spine and spur approach. This has to do with kind of the physical layout of our network. So I'm just going to go ahead and scoot to the next page to show you what that looks like. On our left side of the screen, we can see what we have existing already. So down here in Hilton Head, the light pink color is what's existing. There's a lot going down there in south of the Broad. need to do some better work up here north of the Rod. And then the dark purple are committed projects that are currently in progress. Steps are being taken to get them implemented and on the ground. On the right is the planned network that we would like to see implemented over the next 10 or so years. And you're seeing different ranges of planning. So our red plans, our red pathways are the ones that we anticipate will take the longest. This is 10 or more years. The midterm, the yellow pathways are 5 to 10 years. And the green or immediate term, or the more immediate term ones, that's 5 or fewer years over the next 5 years. And to bring back in that spine and spur network, what that means is that you have a primary kind of spinal artery that connects the entire county. So for our planning purposes, what that was is starting up here near the Cumbie at the Harriet Tubman Bridge on Highway 17, moving down, moving down 17 and down through 21, hitting 170, and you can see where it branches out. So here's one of your spurs and lots of little spurs coming off of the side like ribs in a rib cage, going down 170 to get across the Broad into the South of the Broad, and then crossing over on the Bluffton Parkway, stretching out this way into Hilton Head, and then also continuing across 46. Here we are, 46, and a little bit onto 278. Oh, no, that's not 278. 46 here and going down. Whoops. I'm getting myself confused, heading down this direction. And this is 278, I apologize, no, that is, I apologize. That is the Bluffton Parkway. I was right the first time, doubted myself. So that's our spine that we're moving through. And you can see all of the spurs coming off the sides to stretch out to destinations like Hunting Island, out to Hilton Head, connecting communities like Bluffton and Hilton Head, or St. Helena and Beaufort and Port Royal, Ladies Island as well. So there's a lot of reaching to places where schools are, where economic hubs are, where natural and historic resources are. And so that's our spine and our spur network. And this is what we would ultimately like to see. I do want to stress that this is our wishes now. Things may change. We may find that some of those long-term projects that are listed on here become more accessible and could be done in a shorter amount of time. So that doesn't mean that we hold them off until 10 plus years. This is a flexible plan to accommodate our wishes, and it just kind of lays a baseline for what we all would like to collaboratively work towards, or hope to collaboratively work towards, for our overall network. Here is a quick image of kind of zooming in on what you've got going on in Hilton Head. Now, not all 16 of the pathways that are in your resolution are represented on the mapping exercise, but they are in the charts. So if you look through the plan itself, there are charts listing out every pathway that's on here. So I just want to let you all know that if you're looking at it and you're like, I don't see 16, that's why. But these are some of our Hilton Head specific pathways, as well as some of the ones that have collaboration with Beaufort County. So the charts also list out who the collaborators might be to help get these projects underway. Now, in addition to identifying the pathways, of which there are 139 miles identified in this plan costing approximately $84 million, our funding sources that are identified, it's going to take a lot of creative funding mechanisms to get everything done, as well as an implementation plan for how to get everything done. It's not just putting pathways on the ground, it's also working through education campaigns. It's having support from our various municipalities, potentially adopting into comprehensive plans in the future. It is incorporating this plan into the long range transportation study, which it has already been done. We can check that off. That's happened. It is identifying a staff position at the county to really carry this forward so that we can continue to see momentum as we're trying to plan out our pathways and advocate for those pathways. And it's also reconsidering a capital project sales tax, a 1% capital project sales tax in 2022 to continue to have a nice consistent funding pot for these projects. There's lots of other implementation ideas in there and an action matrix with timing and who needs to do it. So it's a really nice organized matrix to move this forward. And with that, I think I've kind of summed up an executive summary, if you will, of the plan, and I'm ready to take any questions you all may have.
Well, Juliana, thank you very much, and take a deep breath.
Thank you. I was trying to get it in 10 minutes. I don't know if I succeeded.
Tammy, do you have questions or comments?
Probably some of both. Is there a way to take the slideshow presentation off so that of the
Where
screen?
would you like to go? Oh, take
No,
it off the screen, yes.
Yeah, just take it off the screen for me. I can't see the others, and
There you go.
so that would be wonderful for me. It's funny, I think I'll start off with a comment because it was the first thing that struck me when I read the initial packet. And I would ask others, if they haven't read it, to read it and to think about other connections that they can make with statements within what was provided. It was it particularly struck by a quote that is a statement in a quote that was made by Lewis Mumford, that building more roads to prevent congestion is like a fat man loosening his belt to prevent obesity, and that induced demand attracts more traffic. And I think that those connections to other projects with that statement should be reflected on carefully, because I think it says a lot, and it was found in this document, ironically. So leaving that for others to think about, with regard to this project, I think more of the particulars in terms of what does that mean for our current pathways? Or does that mean they get enlarged? Does that mean there's a different types of construction that's used? What is the physical and the aesthetics of it?
Are you meaning the current pathways that you have on the ground in Hilton Head, or current plans for pathways?
Well, I certainly know what the current status is, and I'd be curious as to the future, what this would all mean.
Yeah, so this doesn't necessarily specify exactly what things would look like. And a lot of pathways I know for some of the Beaufort County specific ones are really community driven. And so there's flexibility built into this about how these pathways would look, how they would best serve the communities that they're going to be in or that they're going to be connecting. So it doesn't necessarily mean that future pathways on Hilton Head will have to adhere to certain design guidelines that any other municipality might want to see. It's a flexible kind of baseline of where we want to prioritize our attention for physical pathways on the ground.
And who retains that control? Is that something within the county, or is that, I see Sean is here. I think he probably has an answer.
Yes. So in kind of oversimplifying what's before you, we're really just trying to submit our projects that we have on the CIP or in the books to include in this bigger countywide network. We're not relinquishing any local control on design elements or consistency. I think it would require some coordination on any connections that cross jurisdictions. So as we connect to the mainland, there may be some cooperative or collaborative effort there, but we maintain our ability to control the aesthetic, the quality, the design elements for all of our pathway connections. All the items that are on the list for consideration, that would be under the town's jurisdiction and control. And we thank Juliana and the county for helping to develop this much more regional approach. You can see that network and that web of connections significantly potentially grow through this execution of these plans.
That answered my question. Thank you so much. And thank you for the presentation. It was well done.
Thank you.
Alex?
Yes, sir. Thank you. And Juliana, thank you for the presentation, and good to see you again. Congratulations on your new role.
Thank you.
I don't really have any comments on the resolution or the concept. I think that it is definitely going in the right direction. Okay, it's a huge undertaking, and it's going to take us a long time to get to the finish line. But I appreciate the way that you've summed up the idea. I will say that there's one thing that did catch my ear as you were speaking. in your role as the Beaufort County long-term planner, you said that you have, in this case, used Hilton Head as the example, and I really appreciate that. Okay, we're I guess trendsetters to a degree when it comes to connectivity through pathways, which is great. I just ask that you continue to use us as examples, particularly when there's a regional need that we can participate in. All right. So thank you very much for your efforts.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Glenn.
Thank you, Juliana, Missy. Thank you for an excellent report. I'm glad to see this cooperative effort between the county and the town that is very healthy for both of us. And so I'm very pleased about that. I think it is important to emphasize what Sean just said, and that is that by adopting this resolution, the town is not surrendering control, implementation, maintenance, timing, anything about existing projects or new projects, but rather what we're doing is we are working to have it so that those projects can in the future connect to further county-wide projects. And I think that that is very healthy for all of us as we're moving it forward. So I think it's important for the town to understand that. Then I further comment, I am the town's representative to LATS, which is the Regional Funding for Transportation Authority. And this program has already been presented to LATS, and LATS has recognized and approved the program. What I'm hopeful is that through the efforts of LATS and through a regional approach, we're going to be able to gain more funding for paths and trails on Hilton Head Island and the rest of the county. So I look forward to those efforts as it moves forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. And Juliana and Missy, really a good presentation. I think this is fantastic. Anytime we can provide alternate routes for travel, I think it's a win for our area. A couple of things come to mind, though, as I listen to the presentation. Here I'm wearing my citizen hat. How deeply involved did the planning group get into funding of these ideas beyond the 1% that you talked about?
Yeah, so there are all of the different funding mechanisms that were identified, and then each pathway in the chart has approximate costs for building it for construction, and then operational yearly costs, because once it's on the ground doesn't mean we're done spending money on it. I would say that's kind of the extent to the depth that it got with regard to funding. So it's going to take some more coordination and making sure we're keeping our eyes out for grants and other funding opportunities.
And that's really the point I was going to make, that there are grants available at the state and federal level for this kind of initiative. Is that correct?
Yes, there are,
Okay.
and different things trickle down at different times as well.
I think the Public Planning Committee members are very aware of the congestion that we are experiencing on our pathways at this time. Not only congestion due to just the number of bikes, but also the types of movement that's occurring. I may have overlooked something, but is there an opportunity, and this may be directed more to Sean, that by realigning or changing our lane widths on Pope Avenue and Palmetto Bay Road, we have an almost instantaneous connection to the Cross Island Expressway for fast bikers and perhaps those motorized mopeds or whatever that Frank Babel was referring to. Is this something that is already involved in this plan, or could it be added appropriately at the time, at the appropriate time?
I think the latter, and I'll defer to Sean if he has anything additional to say.
Yeah, so on that, David, and I know that Frank spoke about this commuter connection and be able to accommodate multiple different types of users. I think that's something that we can certainly evaluate, but because it hasn't been vetted through Planning Commission and Council, I think it's something that can grow legs in the next short term, medium term, to meet Council's expectation on delivery of that. And as that or other projects surface that are identified, I would look to Juliana and ask her to amend the plan at a regular interval to include, so that we have consistency between our local plans, the county plan, and then the long range transportation plan as that's amended, as Mr. Stanford mentioned. So that's kind of the goal here.
Yeah, I just, yes, I understand the timing issue and the sequencing here. I'm just adding a personal note that Pope Avenue is an opportunity for us to have a complete street or an attitude towards movement that is very different than what we have now. And I think the sooner we do that, the better off we are. And then phase 2 could be Palmetto Bay Road. But I think Pope Avenue, to me, is where we ought to be focusing in some way from a planning standpoint and in a capital investment standpoint. Personal comment.
Yes, sir. And as part of our strategic plan, I think there is a focus on consistency on the William Hilton Parkway portion, but also Pope Avenue as well. So I think that's something we can evaluate much sooner in the shorter term.
Good. Is there a motion to
May
forward
I
a
ask-
res? Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
May I ask just one, because you brought something up and I actually was one of my notes that I'd written down and didn't ask it, but you put a point more on it for me. It kind of relates to my first question about local control, the cost and the money and the funding. And so we have some of these projects already written into our CIP. How does that work? How does that funding piece work? Is that money that's collected at a pot that's held by, if there were a county position, and so within the county to be distributed through the various municipalities to help with paying for these upgrades? Or can you talk a little bit more about that piece of it so I better understand?
Yeah, I know with regard to a potential future capital sales tax, that the way that our engineering department is talking about that would be to have a pot specific for bicycle pedestrian infrastructure to help spread out. So it would work similarly to like what you just described. Now, how it will take shape more broadly with a staff member pointed to it, it makes sense to do it that way, but I can't say right now how it would manifest. So I know that's not a full answer, but that's where we are.
I think it's an important component to have a better understanding of before town council gets, anyway, I think it's an important piece to have more understanding of before town council gets it to approve. But that's all. I'm sorry for jumping back in. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Tammy. So is there, did you want to say something, Sean?
I certainly don't want to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, or the other way around, snatch defeat from jaws of victory. Just the projects that we have currently programmed in the CIP, they have identified funding sources that were approved through the council budgeting process, and we'll continue to try to execute those. Also, while looking for alternative funding sources through state and federal means. And so if we can offset costs and funding that we've already identified and then stretch that into future year projects, we'll do that. One benefit of including this list of projects into the countywide plan, and ultimately potentially at the regional level, is to open up additional funding opportunities that may be available. So we'll fund our own projects through the CIP that we've already programmed, and hopefully stretch those those projects with other monies we can identify. But this increases ability to gain alternative funding, which I think is a benefit to the town in executing these in a more accelerated manner.
Sean, correct me if I'm wrong. If there were to be a referendum on penny sales tax, and a part of that would be going to a bike ped plan. Every project that would be expected to be paid for by that referendum would be made public as a part of the referendum.
Yes, sir. And because that would be a countywide referendum, we would have a seat at the table and to make sure our projects were vetted and approved by council for submission as part of that effort. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I thought so. All right. If there are no other comments, is there a motion to forward a resolution authorizing the submission of the town pathway project into the Beaufort County Connects Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan 2021? I see Glenn's hand up. I presume that's a motion.
I would make that motion to recommend adoption of this resolution to the full town council.
Thank you, Glenn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you very much. All those in favor, just signify by raising your right hand, please. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And Juliana and Missy, thank you for all of your work. John, good job.
Thank you.
And
Thanks.
if there is no other business before the body, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by raising your right hand. Thank you and have a good day and happy Thanksgiving.
Happy
Thanks.
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.